Hey, why don't we do another episode of The Better Trained Agent? We haven't done one in a while, and I think I've got an interesting topic. Of course, we're going to talk about contracts. That's what we do. But today we're going to talk specifically about the finance supplements. I said plural because there's common language in each one of these finance supplements. Instructions for the buyer, and which includes an instruction for the lender from the buyer. So let's begin. Days, Within 5 days, what must the buyer do? 5 days of the consummation of the contract, he must pay his initial loan fees. Okay, well, got to give the lender some money. He also needs to give the lender some more money to pay for the appraisal. So the buyer pays initial loan fees, pays for the appraisal, and he instructs the lender to begin the loan approval process. Now, there's one more instruction that's very, very important that the buyer needs to do. He must instruct the lender to provide a conditional loan approval, not final loan approval, to the seller, stating the following. Now, this conditional loan approval needs to arrive and be given to the seller within 10 days. So we had 5 days, now we're over into 10 days. Now, the 10-day items are that the lender has reviewed the buyer's creditworthiness, income, and funds necessary to close. So we're good there. Does it always happen? No, doesn't. Confirmation that the buyer has paid his initial loan fees. Well, he had to pay those within the first 5 days, but now the lender is putting the seller on notice that, yes, the buyer has paid his initial loan fees. Also, he needs to let the seller know, the lender, the buyer via the lender, the lender via the buyer, the seller needs to understand that the appraisal has been ordered. Now, he's already supposed to have paid it, but has it been ordered? Is the lender sitting on that for some reason? Maybe an instruction by the buyer. You probably heard of something like that happened. Let's don't pay for that appraisal until we get a little farther down the road and maybe have some inspections. That's a breach. Can't do that. No, no. And finally, that the loan approval is not subject to the sale of the buyer's home. Four things right there that the seller must receive within those first 10 days. Now, what happens if the seller doesn't receive those items? Are there ramifications? Yeah, serious ramifications. At that point, the seller can put the buyer on notice that they're canceling the contract. Then is the contract canceled? Not quite. Not quite. The buyer has 4 days to turn this thing around and provide those four tenants that his creditworthiness has been looked over and he has the necessary funds to close, his confirmation that he's paid his initial loan fees, the property appraisal has been ordered, and is not subject to selling his home. Now, if within that 4 days the seller receives those, then the contract will continue and will go to closing. If not, then the contract cancels. But there's a cause and effect of that. It's not automatically canceled. The seller must put the buyer on notice, and the buyer has 4 days. Well, I hope you found that interesting. There's one more thing that you ought to know, that you can actually have the buyer put the lender on notice of what might happen if the lender doesn't comply, because the lender is not a party to the contract. So there's a supplement in Dotloop called Instructions for Your Lender that we give to the buyer, and it spells out what happens. So I would utilize that if I were you. I utilize it. Actually, I designed it. So I think it's a good tool. Well, thank you for watching today. Another episode of The Better Trained Agent. I was a little verbose, but maybe I'll be more succinct. Mark Twain once said that I've written a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. So I'll keep that in mind next time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.